Hello everyone, this is Take from bigheadtaco.com, and I'm coming to you here from my home studio, aka my garage, to do my first shooting impressions video of the Fujifilm GFX 50S. I did my first impressions sort of just looking over the camera itself and the specs, but this is an actual shooting impressions. So the last video you saw that was on Monday, I shot that in the morning once it came in, and then in the afternoon, so Monday afternoon, and then Tuesday, and then Wednesday. So I had like 2.5 days to shoot with this frantically, and I tried to do as much shooting with the standard 63mm lens, as well as the 32 to 64 wide angle zoom, and the 120mm f4 1:2 macro lens as best I could for these 2.5 days. So this is the very quick first impressions of what I thought about the camera and the 3 lenses, as well as the overall system itself. So let's start this review now. First things first, I had a great time shooting with the GFX 50S. I have the X-T2 here, and if you watched the video when I was with Billy, the Fuji guy, that the DNA, much of the DNA does come from the X-T2. So I mean, clearly it's bigger. It might not look bigger on video, but it is much bigger when you're shooting it in hand in terms of weight and size as well. But if you know your way through an X-T2, it won't take you very long to figure your way through the GFX 50S, just because the button placement, everything is where it should be. I do like, I was a little bit, maybe not surprised, but with the X100 F, I had hoped they would put these locking, these locks that you can put on the dials. I really like being able to either leave it where it is, or like to leave it locked or unlocked. I like that ability. So that is something I really enjoyed shooting with this. In terms of the difference between these two, or what I found better or maybe not as good, well, first of all, in terms of better, the EVF, it is a much lower refresh rate. It's larger when you look through here versus the X-T2, and the X-T2 already had class leading EVF, but the refresh rate on this, when you put it on the performance mode, I think it's like 100 frames per second or faster on the X-T2. I mean, in the daylight, it's just so good. With the GFX 50S, it is, I think Billy said it is 50 frames per second. So during the bright daylight, you can definitely see the difference, but it doesn't bother me when I'm shooting during the day. However, as it gets darker and you're shooting with the EVF, it gets really laggy. And when I was shooting with the 120 f4 lens, and I was shooting that young fella there kiteboarding, I'll maybe insert some pictures or the video. You know, I could see, it seemed a little bit laggy for me when there was a fast moving subject. So this is not meant for sports. This is not meant to track someone moving quickly. The X-T2 is, and so I understand that 50 frames per second in the studio, it's not a big deal. And especially in the studio, if you're tethering and you're shooting to a laptop, or you know, you're viewing through Lightroom Live, then it's not a big deal. But that is something that I noticed. But I also like the fact, if you can see, this EVF sticks out. So if you are shooting with glasses and you have a hat on, I just found that my face doesn't push up against here like this, against the back screen as easy as this. This is very flat, so I'm right up against it. My nose hits the screen here, and so I actually like the fact that this EVF sticks back and out, and the fact that this is actually removable like this, right? And you can put that little, so you just put this little cap on here. So if you decide not to use the EVF, all you got to do is just stick this guy on here. I see, there's these little guidelines. Here we go. So that's kind of how you slide it on if you want to keep this as compact as possible here, flush like that. But you know, for me, I like using the EVF, and so I will always have this on. There was the other EVF that you had that can actually, it could tilt here, it can actually tilt even this way here, so if you're shooting more vertically and you just tilt it up, that was not available for me to test, but I know that once this camera is released, it's supposed to be available right away. And these all have the shoe on top as well. So even if you put any of the accessories on, you can still put the, so right here, you could put a flash or put a microphone if you're shooting video with this, if you wanted to. Another nice accessory is the cable lock that you can put on here. So if you are, again, if you are shooting in the studio, you just screw this on here, and it even has the holes here so that you can run the other cables through it here. And so if you're using the HDMI or the USB out, or even if you're just using headphone cables and monitoring, and you don't want it to be sort of sticking out without some kind of support, you can just wrap it around through here so it gets a little bit more support. So that's a very well thought out accessory, especially for those that need it for studio work. Remember that the GFX is a weather sealed system, and so not only is the body and the grip weather sealed, but all the lenses are, maybe not all the lenses in the future will be, but the current lenses that are available, they're all WR. So someone had mentioned in one of my my live video, I got so much hate for that one, but you know, I like doing live because a video like this, you can't ask me any questions real time, and so, you know, leave your questions down below, your comments. But that's why I like live. That was why I shot that. But one of the things is, someone said, why are you shooting, this camera is not meant for landscape? Well, you know, I think it said this camera's not made for landscape, it's a studio camera. Well, why would you make a studio camera that's weather sealed, WR? Obviously, they want people to shoot with this outside. So architectural, landscape as well. The 32 to 64 lens, which is, we'll talk about that a bit later. The focal range of 24 to 50, that's not a studio lens, right? That's kind of an odd lens to use in studio. And so this works great outdoors. Especially if you come from if you're shooting with this outdoor, other than the weight, it's from the view of the subject, this is bigger. I mean, so this is bigger, but it's not way bigger. And if you're shooting, I mean, I've seen people with people shooting with either film medium format or the digital DSLRs on the street, and it's you know, it's about this size anyways, and so you can pull it off. I know most of us that like to shoot street don't like large cameras, and so if you're not comfortable with large cameras, at first I felt odd shooting with this, but I got used to it. And so I'll be posting pictures of what I got on the street, and I was actually pretty impressed. And one of the things I was impressed about is the ability to use this articulating screen. So if you're out shooting on the street, you can just sort of use it like a twin lens reflex. So you're looking down at the screen like this and you're shooting, and especially with that wide lens, you can get some pretty fantastic, I mean, you could do the same thing with the Fujifilm X70, you could do the same thing with the X-T2, but having all those extra pixels and that extra resolution, extra dynamic range, the micro contrast, the tonality on something like this, it's probably not something that you would do on a regular basis, but if you have access to this camera, I mean, go out there and try to shoot on the street and you can get fantastic pictures. One of the things I did not do is to use this vertical grip at all because it added size, bulk, and weight. If this was on a tripod and I was shooting all day vertically, because the 4:3 aspect ratio, I'm not a fan of it. Micro Four Thirds is 4:3, the 1-inch sensor is 4:3, the iPhone, any of the like the 1/1.7-inch sensor, they're all 4:3. And if you remember, the old tube TVs were all 4:3. I found it's too boxy. I like 16:9. I like the movie aspect ratio 21:9. I like things kind of more panoramic. And so I found that with this camera, it does portrait mode very well. And I'll embed some of the portraits that I took with this lens, but I love how this looks this way, shooting vertically. When I shoot in landscape mode, I just want to, I haven't even decided yet, the pictures I post, if I'm gonna crop them or not, or just shoot them in the full 4:3 aspect ratio, but I probably would just end up cropping these images anyways. And so if you look at the cropped image, so let's just say, so it's 4:3 aspect ratio, and if you decide to crop the image, what will happen? So if you are shooting 4:3 natively, what you're gonna get in large JPEG is the full 51 megapixel, 8256 by 6192, and that's what you're gonna get. On the X-T2, on the 2:3 aspect ratio, you're getting 6000 by 4000. So here you're getting 8256 by 6192 at 4:3. Now if you decide to shoot this in 3:2, like the X-T2, what you're gonna get is an 8256, which is the on the horizontal, right? So that doesn't change, but it does crop down from 6192 down to 5504. It drops down to a 45 megapixel image. If you decide to crop even further to a 16:9, you're getting again the same 8256 wide by 4640 this way here. So if you think about it, if you crop this to a 16:9, you're still getting a 38 megapixel image, 8256 by 4640, still a more vertical resolution than the X-T2, and you got a lot more width on this camera. Now there is one unusual aspect ratio in here, which is a 65:24, and someone had mentioned it to me because even I thought, what is this? And he mentioned it and he said the X-Pan. So for those of you who remember the X-Pan, the Hasselblad X-Pan, that was made by Fujifilm, and the Fujifilm version was called the TX1 or the TX2, and it shot almost double 35mm frame. So 35mm is 24:36. So it should be 24:72, but it was a 24:65. So there is a 65 wide aspect ratio by 24 tall. So that works out to, again, it's still the same 8256 this way by 3048 this way. And I took a few pictures like that just for fun, and I don't have access to RAW, so I don't know if you shoot in this mode, if you lose it, you lose all that vertical, the top and the bottom crop. I don't think so. I think the RAW should still keep the whole thing, but it just kind of allows you to see the image crop like that, and it is kind of neat. It's kind of an homage to the TX1 and TX2 or the X-Pan, so it was neat that they included it. If you decide to shoot 1:1 ratio, what you're going to get is a 6192 by 6192, which still works out to be a 38 megapixel image. And so that's the image size. You can see when you're importing these, I shot in lossless compression because I didn't want to deal with humongous files over 100 megabytes if I shot lossless. If I shot uncompressed. So yeah, so we don't have access to the RAW files yet, so I'm shooting both RAW and fine JPEG. So all the images that you've seen, this is just JPEGs, and I have not found a shot that I've taken where I couldn't recover any highlights or shadow details, and so I'm pretty impressed with the JPEGs. But when you're working with a 50 megapixel sensor, and I mean, look at the sensor size on this, it's just humongous. When you're working with a sensor that size, even the JPEGs, you're going to get pretty decent dynamic range, 14 stops of dynamic range. You can get with this sensor, and so I'm pretty impressed, but I am excited to be able to work with the RAW files. I'm not going to bother shooting uncompressed and then lossless compression because even with the X-T2, I'm happy with the compressed RAW files. I'm not shooting anything hyper critical that I need that much information to be able to recover and put my images together. And so that is that. Now let's take a look here in terms of the way that I shot with it. A few things that I did not like. Now there's lots of customizable buttons. They don't label anything, which is the way I want it, especially if you're a pro. You could tell this camera really had the pro in mind. You can use back focus button there if you want, which is exactly where your thumb lands, like that. If you hold like this, that's where your thumb lands. The X Pro 2, which I'm actually shooting this video on, the button is here for back focus, although you can switch it with the auto exposure lock button, but really that's where it should be. Ergonomically, everything works out great. The deep grip is nice, and then there's a bit of a thumb rest here, so walking on the street with this, it'd be nice to have maybe a wrist strap or some kind of a strap, kind of a grip here, but even without it, shooting with this on the street was great. The two buttons that I did not, well, two buttons and a dial that I did not like is these two here on top. The delete and the play button, and the focus control is not horrible because it's not something that I use very often, but when you're shooting like this and then you quickly want to look at what you shot, play is kind of, you have to kind of crawl over it. And before exporting the images, if you took a lot of pictures and you want to pre-edit them by looking through and deleting out the ones that were kind of throwaway shots, it's just that it's on top, so you're going to like scroll, and then you got to kind of push from the top, so it's in an odd spot. If they could have put it somewhere else, I guess they would have, but this thing sticks out pretty far, and so that's one of the things that people complained about aesthetically, that people call this camera ugly. And even when I first saw it from the front, so I'll remove the lens, from the front this camera looks sexy. I think it looks beautiful. From the back straight on, this camera also looks pretty decent, right? It looks a lot like the X-T2. However, from the side, this camera, this sticks out here. It looks pretty ugly. Now, Billy did mention that, a lot of it has to do with where the battery's going. This is like 1.5 times the size of the standard battery that goes into the other cameras, right? So it is pretty thick. I thought maybe if they built this more vertical, like the Leica SL, and put more of the elements down below, they could have put this flatter up. But then if they did that, then it would only extend the grip to go even further down. So maybe they, Fuji did the best that they could with it. But it does look slightly unsightly, if you can call it that. But it's very functional. The fact that the battery compartment goes up the side, including the control grip battery compartment, both come out sideways. So on a tripod, you want, on a pro camera, like including the X Pro 2, the memory card slot is on the side on the X Pro 2 and the X-T2 and the GFX. But the X Pro 2, the batteries, and the X-T2, the batteries on the bottom. However, with the mounting plate centered, the battery can still come in and out without having to remove the tripod mounting plate. This one here, if you put this onto a tripod, you can shoot all day. Let's say you're tethering, you have all your cables going through, and then you need to swap out batteries, swap out memory cards. It's easy. This stays on. So this is very well thought out for studio photographers. The PC sync terminals in the front, even the strap lugs. I was struggling with the straps before in my live video, and people were just like destroying me for that. But it was hard to do because it was one-handed, but it works very well. It basically, you slip it in like this, and then you just press this down, and now it's locked in, and same with the other side. And this is sort of a loop through, so you can add your own straps to this. I'm going to take some really close-up pictures. I hope that's okay, Fujifilm. And my buddy Victor from Barton 1972 in Hong Kong says he wants to make his own straps for this. So third-party companies will probably come up with really unique strap systems for this. But this is very functional. It's not the sexiest strap out there, but it's very functional. I don't like this loop through because you have all these little, these little things sticking out the side. But it's functional, and then as soon as you want to remove it, you just pull that part up, and then you pull this part here up, and it just slips off easily. So very well thought out for studio photographers. But then when you don't have the strap, you just got these little tiny little lugs sticking out the side. So that is perfect. It is a touch screen, and this will give an indication of the future, even of the X-T20. How they will improve the touchscreen, or the X70 or the X70S, if that comes out soon, is you swipe up for your histogram, you can swipe up again, and you get your level. One of the things is, although there is no menu navigation, the main menu navigation, so you can't, touchscreen doesn't work here, but the Q mode does. So if you go into Q mode, here, let's just get out of the standard one here. You're in Q mode, you can press and you can choose your features on Q mode. And so obviously this will come to I think the X-T20 and the X70 on a firmware update. and it points to a future of being able to navigate more than just touch. So when you're in shooting mode, you do have the touch AF, and you do have you can turn it on and off, and you can choose area and stuff like that by just touching the screen. So that is something that is fantastic that they would apply, because before it seemed like Fujifilm putting the touch screen on the X-T20 and the X70. It seems like they're putting in consumer level cameras. On the X Pro 2 and the X-T2, they didn't put it on, but they put it on the GFX. So I think they're seeing that even pros want touch screen. And so hopefully X-T3, touch screen, and instead of, having the option of having the joystick to move around as well as a touch screen is great, and I actually use it more than I thought I would use it. So that is fantastic. And of course, this has the vertical articulation if you wanted to. So if you're shooting vertically, if you have the EVF, you can articulate up as well. That optional articulating tilting EVF. But if not, and you're in your studio and you're shooting down low, either on the street or in the studio, you can articulate like this, just like the X-T2 can. I want to talk about the shutter. It is a focal plane shutter. Fujifilm made the decision because, as you can see now, you can adapt the H lenses that Hasselblad has, as well as the old GX645, I think, with Fujifilm. This is a discontinued film camera. All those will fit on here with that adapter, and those are all leaf shutter lenses. And so with the focal plane, you can actually bypass the focal plane and then use the built-in leaf shutter in those lenses, where if this camera was leaf shutter only, if you adapted other lenses on here, if those lenses don't have their own shutters, then you can't use this camera. So you get the best of both worlds. You can use leaf shutter if the lenses have leaf shutter, but if they don't, then you just use a focal plane shutter. And you have the ability then, with one of the accessories, you can actually stick on the view camera adapter, and you can put large format lenses on here with the bellows, and you can do tilt shift. You can use like old large format lenses and adapt it onto this. So I think that is something that guys that are, say you are medium and large format shooter and you have old lenses and you'd like to see what it looks like on a digital camera, and putting something like that onto a APS-C or even a full frame camera, you do lose, there's quite a bit of crop in. So this is probably the least amount of crop in that you would need when you adapt those large format lenses onto here. So I think that is a pretty sweet idea. That is it in terms of accessories and sort of overall feel. Moreover, I'm going to take the vertical grip, booster grip off. Very well implemented, well designed. It reminds me a lot of the X-T2's grip. I think Fujifilm did say that you can get the adapter. Here you go. So you can actually plug in directly and charge, but that is not included with the grip. It's an accessory, which to me is a bit odd. Just charge an extra 25 bucks for that, and include it into the price. But anyways, that's the decision. I did carry this with me the whole time I was shooting, just because it held that spare battery, and I thought maybe I'll use it, but you know what, shooting like this made more sense. It kept it compact, light for what it already is. And as I mentioned, most of what I did with this was to shoot my own my normal street style in Vancouver, which seems odd with a camera of this size. But I bumped into a few people and I let them try it, and they thought that you could pull it off. And I think you can pull this standard lens, works out to be a 50mm equivalent, 50 f2.8, shooting on the street without the grip. But really, I had fun shooting with this lens. But I thought I would just mention, as I showed in my first impressions of the camera when it first came in, everything, the entire kit, when this was shipped to me from Fujifilm, the entire kit, this is what I think they give the ex-photographers. It's a special edition donkey bag, but this is not very big, but this held the body, the grip, the charger, the batteries, all lenses, all the lenses, everything, the entire package that was shipped to me came from Fujifilm in this tiny compact bag. So how many, okay, so I know the Hasselblad X1D is smaller and, if you can call it, sexier looking than the GFX. Although I would argue that some cameras are so ugly, they're sexy. I love the car Saab. Some people hate Saabs and think they're the ugliest cars in the world. And I admit, they're not as sexy as a Ferrari or a Porsche. but it's so ugly, it's beautiful. And I would argue that the Pentax 6.7 is also probably the most ugliest slash prettiest camera ever. It's so ugly, it's pretty. And this camera is not up there with the Pentax 6.7. It is not so ugly that it's pretty. It is just semi-ugly from the side, so it's not so, I mean, look from the bottom, you can sort of see it's kind of an odd shaped camera, but the whole thing fits inside this. Now, I'm sure the X1D will also fit in a small bag, but remember that camera system, I think still, does it only have the one lens? I think maybe. Maybe there's 3 coming lenses. Fuji, by the end of the year, will have 6 lenses for this system. So it shows you how quickly how quickly they're pumping these things out. And who says that Fujifilm can't make a X1D style mirrorless, more of a pancake style? So it won't have articulating screen. The batteries probably maybe either thinner or to use the same batteries on the X-T2. Who says they won't make that in the future? Because again, these are not leaf shutter, these are all focal plane shutters. So you can even see the line here. It shows you where the actual sensor is. The flange back distance is very short. It's like 2.4 centimeters. It's very, very short. So they can clearly make this smaller if they chose to not add all these extra features on here. So let's see if Fujifilm will make even like an X100F non-interchangeable version of a medium format, or have an interchangeable lens version but much more compact, and maybe not even including EVF, right? Just to keep it nice and thin. So maybe Fujifilm will do that, and look forward to that. So yeah, so it all fits into here. So I am pretty impressed with this as an overall system. So now let's talk about the lenses. So the first lens is the standard 63 f2.8 RWR, so it's a 50mm lens, so it's equivalent to what the XF35 lens is. And some people ask me, can you do a back-to-back test? When I have more time, when my production review copy comes in, I'll do that. But for now, I did make a mistake in one of the videos. I mentioned that it's the same processor and the same sensor technology as in the XT2, X Pro 2, and the XT20, and actually it's not. So thank you for the correction. This only has contrast detect focus, and so in bright daylight, it focuses about, I would say it's not as slow as the X Pro one, but it's kind of sluggish. Like, I'm not sure if you can hear it, but it is kind of slow. I actually found that the 32 to 64, which probably has an internal, 1-to-1 lens that's focusing, so it's a little bit zippier. It reminds me of a lot of the 10 to 24 lens, super quiet focusing. This thing kind of buzzes. It reminds me of like the first gen. I'm not sure if you can see it, but it reminds me of the first gen Fujifilm prime lenses. That's kind of reminds me of. So it's a little bit slow. You're not, if you're gonna shoot it on street, remember you have to shoot this lens on the street. f2.8 on this is like f2. You gotta times it by 0.8. So f2.8 times 0.8 works out to, I think, 2.24. So that's your aperture, f2.2. So it's very narrow. So if you're trying to shoot street and get decent depth of field, with the APS-C system, I'm happy between f4 to f8, but typically the focus on this is so fast on the X2, it'll destroy the GFX in focusing speed. But I could shoot even 2.8 or f2 with the 23mm lens, spot on, and gets the shot. But if I want more depth, f4, f5, 6. With this lens, with this system, I found that I had to stop down to f11, f16 if I wanted decent depth. So just remember that when you're shooting this on the street, that with a larger sensor, you're gonna have to be more aware of your depth of field with this camera. So this is a decent lens, but my favorite lens on this system was shooting with the 32 to 64. The 32 to 64 works out to be about a 24 to 50. I think exactly it's like 24 to 51, but 24 to 50. And you think about lenses that you would use for street photography on the standard XF system. So this GFX, the lens, the mount is the G mount. Okay, so these are G mount lenses, and this is the X mount, or is it X? Yeah, it's the X mount. And so on an X mount camera with the APS-C, for street, probably the lenses that most people use starts at with the XF16, XF18, XF23, and XF35, right? So in terms of equivalency, it's like saying a 24 mil, 28 mil, 35 mil, 50 mil. Very common focal lengths for the street. Well, this zoom here is 24 to 50. So you get all those lenses, the XF16, 18, 23, and 35, all in this one lens. Now this is a huge honking, and see here, the weight of this lens. This lens is 875 grams. So it's not yet 1 kilo, but is getting right up there. 77 mil filter thread. It focus distance, at full wide, it's 50 centimeters. So you can't get that close in here. It's a very complicated 14 elements and 11 groups, including 3 aspherical and 2 extra low dispersion elements with 1 super ED lens. So this is, and it's an f4 constant, and this is f4 on digital medium format. So we're getting, again, times by 0.8, so maybe like an f3.2 constant. So it's a very, they said it reminds me of the 10 to 24 f4 constant, but it's a very big lens. But shooting with this articulating screen down like this, and you're shooting wide, and I'll post some pictures that I shot while shooting in this way, it really did feel like I'm shooting with a medium twin lens reflex or like a medium Hasselblad. And looking down and shooting, I was actually able to get certain shots that, in a way, I never thought about shooting with the X-T2. And maybe it's just the weight of this camera. It just feels lower in terms of, it feels better when it's lower and like a lower center of gravity. And just sort of cupping this lens because it's so heavy, it just felt natural to shoot down like this. And I got shots that I had never got using any other camera. And so, yes, this lens looks insane to shoot for street, but I actually had a good time, and I was pretty addicted shooting this on the street. Now I can't remember exactly what f-stop I was at. Maybe I was at f8, probably between f8 and f16, depending on when I was shooting. And often in the bright sunlight, I shot with this AF all the way through because I really wanted to test the AF. And in bright daylight, it rarely missed. So I did mention this focus, it's an internal focusing, so nothing on the outside moves when it focuses. And I think it's so quiet that it's probably, like I said, it's a single lens element in there that's focusing on its own. So it's very fast and zippy, quicker than this. This thing, you can, this whole front starts moving in and out. So the entire lens elements are shifting probably in front of the aperture. So as that shifts back and forth, it's just slow. This was a lot faster than the standard lens. So even when I shot at 64, this is a 63, so it's very close to this. Optically, obviously this would be better corrected, and it's f2.8 versus f4. But it did feel though that that I didn't need that lens because I basically shot from 24 wide, 28, 35, 50 equivalent using this lens. So out of all these lenses, I shot with this the most, and I got the best pictures out of all of these lenses here. Now the final lens that I want to talk about, there is no other lens to talk about, is this 120 f4. This is a 1:2 macro, so it's decent. You get quite close. Let me just see here what it says here. You can get the magnification is 0.5, so that's 1:2. You can get 45 centimeters, and it even has a focus limiter here, so you can actually limit the focus between 0.45 and 0.9 meters. So anything beyond that, it just won't focus. So especially if you're doing still life, especially if you're doing product shots and you don't want it to hunt beyond 0.9 meters, you just put it into this mode and it stays there. You also have basically 0.9 to infinity. So let's say you're not doing any macro stuff and you don't want this searching all the way till minimum focus, then you put it there, and then you have full, which means it will fully shoot the entire focal range. But having that is great, especially on a macro lens, that you can dub it. You can use this instead as like a portrait lens. And because it does, this 120mm lens does work out, let me just see here, does it even mention? Yeah, it works out to be a 95mm, so that's a great focal length to shooting, for shooting portraits. And f4 again, in 30, if you wanna think about it in terms of 35mm, it's, I should have done the math. So it's 4 times 0.8, which I think it's like f3.2. So that's pretty decent. I did use this as kind of like a sports lens. There was a Jack. He was Jack Ryder. He's a pro kite. Anyways, I'll embed the pictures here, and this is out of these 2 lenses, this is the only lens that has optical image stabilization. And so I even shot video with this. So video with this, and with video, because it's the crop in, it actually kind of works out because he was out in the ocean, and it was great that I got a little bit more telephoto, and it tracked him actually pretty good. And you know, like, it's not the most stable video. You'll see I won't adjust the stability, so you see how I handheld it, and that was not, it was handheld. I wasn't on a tripod, so that would have, if it was on a tripod, it would have been even better as I panned, but it was all pan, just all by hand. And I took some pictures of him as well. So even sort of medium distance sports, can you get away with this lens? Probably. So those are the 3 lenses, and you know, they all come with the hoods. Here's one of the hoods here. Huge, right? Huge hoods. I don't like them unless you need them. In fact, in one of the pictures, I may have already posted it, using the 32-64, I purposely shot into the sun, and you could see, I just wanted to see how the flare is like, and there's kind of funny little rainbow in the bottom, and the hot spot with the sun was up at the top. The picture, I'm happy with this ability to control flare, so this lens worked out pretty good. Now in terms of the lens to be released, there are 2 lenses that Fujifilm says will be coming out mid-year, so it's already almost March, so we're talking the next 3 or 4 months, it will be coming out, is the GF23 f4, which works out to be an 18mm equivalent. So that's a bit unusual. I thought maybe they would go 21mm equivalent, so more of like a GF26 maybe, or 27. Instead, Fujifilm decided to go 18mm equivalent f4. It is, you know, all these lenses are WR, right? They're all weather sealed. And there is, I think this lens is going to be popular, especially for the street photographers or those that want to shoot street with a camera this big, is the GF45 f2.8 RWR. Now that works out to be a 36mm equivalent. So basically, it'll be your medium format X100 if you want to see it that way. So that'll be a great lens. And then this one is quite cool, quite unique, and I'm kind of excited to do portraiture with it. It is the GF110mm f2 RLMWR. So f2 times 0.8 is going to be like f1.6. So it's like a Sumilux, right? So it's like a 87mm f1.8. So that is going to have crazy shallow depth of field. Again, if you're going to do modeling with it and take pictures of people, make sure you know what eye. So that's where you do get face detect on this, and you can choose which eye to focus on. So pick the eye, and even then maybe you want to do some focus bracketing, if there is focus bracketing in it. If not, then you just have to manually play with the aperture or the focus distance, so you can, hopefully you'll get the shot. So those 3 lenses, so the total of 6 lenses, and with the adapters you can get the other what do you call it? The H mount lenses. They are going to be manual focus only, but that opens you up to like another 6, 7, 8 different lenses. So it does say here the Fujinon HC lenses for the GX645AF, which is now discontinued. So you can get that and the view camera adapter. If you have tons of 4x5 large format lenses, you can attach those onto this camera. So again, that's my first impressions, my 3 days, 2.5 days of shooting with the GFX 50S. And my first impressions is, well, I mean, the proof's in the pudding. You can see the pictures that I posted. Fantastic pictures. I've only been working with the JPEGs and I'm already blown away by what I'm seeing. As Billy had mentioned, even some of the curves of the film simulations had to be adjusted from the APS-C censored X-series cameras to the new medium format because this handles dynamic range better. So especially some of the shadow detail stuff that where on the APS-C curve profiles you would have just lost all details in the shadows. This thing can handle it. So they had to readjust some of the curves, so you will get the same film profiles, but the way that it will, the tonality of, if you're shooting the exact same scene, you're gonna get wider dynamic range out of this, which then they had to adjust the film profile. So I'm excited to see, by applying these various film profiles in post, which I cannot right now because of there's no RAW converter that's available that I can use at this point. But I have shot everything in RAW, so as I start adding it, I'll reprocess the images that you've seen. I shot all of them either in classic chrome or in Acros, and so you'll see more of a variety of the type of shots that I did shoot, and I'll apply the different profiles and sort of see what I'm gonna get. But I'm excited to be able to tweak the images even further in Lightroom and in Photoshop and see what I'm getting. But this is great. I think I did mention, besides the AF, there is the shutter lag on this is nothing like the XT2. When you press the XT2, you shoot. So if you're shooting, forget even sports, you're shooting street and you're shooting like critical, you want focus quick and fast, you will still take, so sure, you get higher resolution images from this, higher megapixels, but in terms of focus speed, focus accuracy, and shutter lag, this has a bit of a lag, you know, like it just feels not clunky, but you press the button here and it just, you hear that? Like it just kind of like press, like that. Where the XT2 is as soon as you press it, and you know, forget continuous, I don't shoot continuous anyways, but as soon as you press this, it's just like, right? It's just way more, the lag is very little, the focus is very fast. So in the end, as much as I had fun shooting with this, and I still will shoot more with this and I'll still have fun shooting with it, I still think if you want to shoot street and quick and fast, the XT2 with the 23 f2WR is still the two lens and body combo of choice for me. But there is a neat thing in here is that you do have the ability to go from the mechanical shutter to the electronic shutter, and just like the XT2, you can choose for it to, once it hits the top 1/4000th of a shutter speed, so it's not 1/8000th because the shutter is so much larger, you just can't go higher at this time faster than 1/4000th. But if you want to go faster, then it can go into electronic shutter if you wish, or you can just turn that off. But just remember the drawbacks of using the electronic shutter, like, you know, you can't use flash, as well as you're going to get rolling shutter. So I just kept it, for me, I just kept it at if I'm shooting street and I wanted to get maximum shutter speed, I just shot mechanical and I just quickly adjusted with the ISO, which is right here like that, right? So shooting on the street, shooting in the studio, shooting weddings, shooting portraiture. If you shoot with the Fujifilm X system, this is great. If you're currently shooting with high-end DSLRs and you're considering buying the GFX as your new wedding, portraiture, that kind of thing, I think this is an awesome, awesome choice for you to pick, because right off the bat, unlike the Hasselblad X1D, which is not meant as a studio camera, although you could use it like that, this is designed as a systems camera with all the different adapters, 6 lenses by the end of the year, focal plane shutter. You know, it just has everything you want for studio, high-end studio camera. You got the 50 megapixels, you got the dynamic range, the 14-star dynamic range, because of the larger surface area on the sensor, that this will get the job done without having to spend, you know, like there is a Leica medium format system out there. There's Pentax, there's Mamiya Phase 1, Hasselblad. This is probably the most, considering it's Gen 1, this just came out, although the DNA of the X system has found its way into here, so that partially helped Fujifilm, but as well, their long history of making medium format bodies, cameras, lenses, that experience just quickly just went over to this system. So it feels like a very mature system. They consulted portrait, medium format, studio, commercial photographers while they were building this, so they had all their input, and you can see that influence built into this camera, minus the fact that it's just a little bit ugly. But hey, you know what? I don't think a lot of studio guys care about how pretty a camera is. Have you seen some of the large format cameras? They're pretty ugly looking cameras. But other than the looks of this, which is open to debate, this is great. So wait for a more of a long-term, more in-depth. I'll start setting all the custom settings and stuff like that, because 2.5 days is not long enough to really know how camera works, including being able to shoot in the C mode, so that you can, instead of using the dial, a lot of guys are, especially DSLR guys, are used to using the front and rear dials to control shutter speed and aperture, so you can do that. So I didn't even try that yet, so I'll give that a go. It's nice to have the locking dials on here. I wish to drive, like the XT2 has the 2-layer dials, the doubled up dials. I wish it had that as well. I don't know why they didn't put it on here, but obviously they have the reasons. So wait for a more of a long-term review that I'm gonna get in the next couple of weeks. I should have an actual production copy. Maybe I'll do an unboxing, and then I actually had to cancel. I did have set up a model and an actual portrait photographer. He shoots film, and we were going to do a side-by-side, shooting this, scanning the negative to a 50 megapixel equivalent. So actually shooting it so that when we scanned it, we would get, in terms of resolution, we get 8256 by 6192. And this sort of seeing the benefits of shooting film, benefits of shooting digital, and just sort of, like, it's not like which one will win. Workflow, obviously digital workflow is a lot faster, quicker, more convenient. You can tether. With film, there's a subtlety and a tonality to film that I don't think even with this sensor you're gonna get, but just to sort of see, right? Look out for that video once I get a production copy. And so I think that's it. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for your patience as I played around with the live video. Oh man, alive, I got destroyed by people shooting that live video. But I still believe in live because you can do Q&A and you can ask questions while I do it. But that next time I'll make sure it's tripod mounted, and I'll have camera girl or someone moderating it for me, acting as my producer and letting me know kind of the questions that are coming in. And so look out for more live videos, look for more videos. So don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to like, guys, because liking really does help my brand here as I look for sponsors and different collaborators. So thanks for watching, and happy shooting.